Like you have demand coming from all of these sources, but there's very little visibility into which of those things is actually working and driving incrementality with the right accounts that we care about. And meanwhile, the team that's supposed to be responsible for that pipeline, which I would say is marketing, they're fixated on an MQL number, which is an arbitrary definition of leads that generally are things that they're trying to take credit for through some sort of like attribution to say marketing is driving this many leads and we're hitting our lead volume, even though marketing is a small piece of the overall puzzle. And there's actually a much bigger unlock to be able to look at everything that could be impactful for influencing your target customer and actually understanding what is the relative sort of efficiency and incrementality of those different actions and how can you bring them together in a way that maybe makes it harder to attribute what exactly worked, but ultimately influences buyers really well.
Welcome to the Product Tea with Leah. I am your host, Leah Dorin, and we are about to spill the tea with the best from tech about product growth and senior leadership topics. Welcome to the whirlwind world of your go-to guru for everything that scales. He's not just a VC operating partner, he's a seasoned navigator in the high seas of high-stakes startups. Every week through his newsletter, Growth Unhinged, he dives into the playbooks of the fastest-growing startups, exploring the nitty-gritty of product-led growth, pricing, and go-to-market strategies, and why MQLs are the greatest thing in the world. When he's not dissecting growth strategies, you can say something in a second to this. When he's not dissecting growth strategies, Kyle can be found mastering Mediterranean dishes, tackling trails, or sweating it out at Barry's. Whether it's on the tennis court or in the tech trenches, he brings the same intensity and insight. Welcome to the Product Tea for the second time, Kyle Poyar, and he's not a lover of MQLs. How are you doing this morning?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on. Did ChatGPT write that, or did you write that?
Some parts I had to unfortunately do with ChatGPT because I was running a little bit low. So basically what I did, and we're not going to keep this in the recording, of course. Yes, we are. Is I went on the about section of your blog because, everything is complicated and Leah never has time. And then I said, hey, ChatGPT, just make an intro for the podcast for this. So this is why it sounded so good.
Sounded like a movie trailer.
Do you want to correct anything about that intro, or are you totally fine with everything?
I mean, I'll take credit for all of it.
Also that you're a lover of MQLs.
Well, you updated that at the end.
That's true. Okay, fine, fair enough. Okay, Kyle, do you want to? No, you do not want to introduce yourself anymore. Everybody knows you at this point as well, and you have a great Substack. But before we go into the compliments and then the more interesting stuff. What do people get wrong about you nowadays when they get to know you?
So I think one thing I actually get a lot of feedback on is that people expect me to be kind of really nice. I'm Midwestern, right? I'm like, I try to be polite, right? Respectful, not the most confrontational person. And I think people sometimes mistake that for like either weakness or like not having strongly held convictions or whatever it is. But the reality is that I have pretty strong beliefs and also it's not that I'm critical, but I take a critical lens to looking at things and trying to make them better. And so I think when people first meet me, that doesn't come through. And then after a few interactions, they're like, oh, he's a different person than we expected.
Let me ask you a question. So let's say you would be invited to dinner somewhere, and these are people that you do not know that much, but you know them a little bit, and the food is not good. How are you gonna say that?
Well, it's a good question. If it's people that I don't know well, I probably will just eat it and not say anything and keep the peace. If it is people I know well, I will be probably on Yelp or Google reviews during the meal.
Oh, wow. Okay. That is it's just like, oh, I love the food so much. And then afterwards on Yelp, you're just going to destroy them. Okay. Well, we're not going to talk about food and food criticism, but I can confirm that you have some really, I think you have some good well-informed hot takes that that definitely take a stand. So you and me, you have been in this industry for quite some time. I think you've been longer on the PLG trend as well than me, of course, also because of the entire PLG open view origin kind of story and so forth. And yeah, we've been posting a lot in the last couple of years, and things have changed, right? Like things have changed due to a lot of factors. First of all, we're now way cooler than we used to be back in the days, but the industry also has changed quite a lot, and with it, like it feels to me a little bit. And I try to make this point quite often that the structures that we had are showing their ages. You know, like the companies in terms of like what marketing does, the classical way that sales works, the classical way that product works. Everything seems to kind of change, and with it also the distribution methods. So like product-led growth, sales-led growth, whatever it is. I start to struggle to kind of differentiate the two. You know, like it starts to become really difficult because most of the companies that are doing something that is profitable in the market, so for a good CAC or like a good multiple or whatever the companies are running at, it seems to mix and be more on a shade, you know, like or on a how do you say like on a scale rather than like on a buy scale where you say like yeah you do PLG or you don't. What has been what's your observation on this? Just to phrase it nicely right now.
Well, I think if you to put everything in tech, someone finds out something that works really well. Like this could have been, initially it was field sales on the golf course, and then people were like, oh, we can actually have sales that's on the phone located in one area that doesn't need to travel all the time. And then it was, oh, we can build these sort of BDR, SDR teams that can cold call, or and HubSpot said, hey, we can do content marketing and then call anyone who downloads our ebook, right? So you have these phases where someone has this insight around a way to grow that's either drives better conversion with target audiences or kind of more efficiency. And that ends up being, identified as an interesting trend and then widely copied by everyone, and copied so much that it honestly stops working. Or it might work for certain people, but you can't really rely on that as a differentiator. I think that's both like what's frustrating and fascinating in tech, is that if you try to stay true to the same playbook that might have worked 10 or 15 years ago, you're just going to fall behind.
I don't disagree, but the problem is, I think, specifically when we talk about distribution models, like if we talk about, okay, like, I want to sell my product into the market with a self-serve kind of motion and so forth. Yeah, you're right? Like everybody's trying to do this right now. Also, everybody's doing content marketing and so forth. But that doesn't mean that the old methods that nobody's doing now are starting to become effective. That's the other thing, right? Like this is kind of like, I almost feel like, so I agree with your example, but I think if you're not doing some sort of PLG right now, then you're missing out on a table stake that you need to have in order to participate in the market, because there is so much competition going around right now. Because the customers are just expecting it. It's almost like I feel like PLG is so right in a time where everything looks so fucking perfect with AI, and it's very, very hard to kind of, like BDRs that are just not BDRs anymore, like, but more like AI models and some, so, like all these funny ideas that we have in tech that are just like, they're very dystopian in some kind of way. But I think you have to do it, right? So like you have to do some sort of self-serve nowadays, at least to a relatively high segment lately in B2B for sure.
Yeah, I think it's to me, PLG is still very relevant, and like the product-led growth techniques still apply. And I agree with you in the sense that they're now becoming increasingly table stakes, where their expectations, right? People expect products to just work. They expect to have, intuitive user experiences. They want to see time to value really quickly. They don't want to have to wait to get qualified by a sales rep and then have a demo in a few weeks just to, maybe have access to the product upon $1 million contract. And I think even some of the expectations have changed so much that a trend right now is allowing people to use your product without even signing in, right? Without creating a login, and then only creating a login once you want to save your progress, right? And so like people are even pushing the boundaries of product-led growth. But I think this notion of that, like there are product-led growth companies and then there are sales-led growth companies as a dichotomy, that's increasingly going away. It's not a binary,
Yeah.
black or white type of thing. And the other thing for me is that the reason why product-led growth was a concept OpenView got really excited about in 2016 and kind of tried to build a community around was because we saw it as delaboring kind of the go-to-market motion, right? You could take something that was extremely time and people intensive, and you could turn to product-based solutions that would work really well at scale. They would decouple growth from just adding more headcount, and they would offer a better customer experience because it was always on and always worked for your customers. Some of the early adopters of that, I'm thinking Atlassian, Slack, Zoom, I mean, you name it, Miro, these companies built amazing companies, but now a lot of those aspects of what they've built are just the expectation that people have going in, and so it's not enough to necessarily differentiate you. But that's not to say
Yeah.
it goes away, because if you're not doing it, you're potentially falling behind.
Yeah, I think you're not exciting any VCs nowadays by just adding the word PLG to your slides. AI is also losing a little bit of its grip, to be honest. I think, I mean, to the better, right? Like it is much more about some core metrics and so forth, which is also true. But then we have the other side of a VC business where, I mean, I've been also looking into a lot of pitch decks, not as a VC, right? Like I'm not looking from the investor's perspective, but usually from the companies on like, hey, what do we have to highlight in a specific pitch deck to impress VCs or investors, like in general? And I feel it's an interesting move in kind of seeing what the market considers to be a differentiator going forward. Like, what is a good investment hypothesis? And I think we're always coming back to the people in the end, right? And I know it sounds very romantic and so forth, but it always feels to me like that in a pitch deck that you can talk about PLG, market size, all of it. We all know that these numbers they're not, this is not how the end product will look like. That's fine, but we have some kind of possible path there. But then you have like one slide that nobody really looked at where they talk about the founders, right? Like who they are and so forth. And there is this kind of Jedi meme, right? Like where you are on the one side and you think like, oh, everything is about the team, and then it's going to be about metrics, but then it's about the team again, like the individual people. And I think this comes down to the fact of good investments usually have good founders behind that do not fight with each other. They do not have a cap table where you can get locked out if just one person has a fight with another one. That's another important one. And they are just capable of like seeing market trends and things that change with time, because what we cannot predict is the markets in the future, right? Like nobody has expected that AI would have taken such a big kind of leap 4 years ago. Maybe you did, of course, but
Well, and it's some of the companies that have been able to pivot. I'm thinking about like Clay, for example, which was kind of wandering the desert for a while and is now like one of the hottest companies in everyone's mind. Like it really does take founders that are that have that kind of unique insight on the market and can capitalize on it. But I would say there are some other things in pitch decks that would impress folks, like specifically for me, looking at retention and cohort-based retention. If the product is so sticky that people are on monthly plans and no one ever churns, especially with AI products, like that's pretty impressive. That makes me want to kind of spend more time. Another thing for me is like looking at the actual economic value created by a product. Is this something that just solves like a super lightweight pain point that like saves someone a little bit of time from something they don't want to do manually? Or is this something that creates real value? And in an AI agent world, potentially solves a problem in an end-to-end way. That economic value creation becomes really interesting to me, especially right now. And then the third thing is like, is there something defensible about what you're building and that could come from the people who are building it, the data they have access to, the go-to-market advantages they have, or just a different kind of way of architecting their product. But what is defensible about what you're doing that will make it really hard for others to catch up to you, even if they have more capital?
so This is an interesting one because I shifted my opinion a little bit on this, and you have clearly more experience when it comes from the VC side and so forth. So I don't disagree with you, but the problem is with metrics that are easily recognizable and also calculatable, like revenue, retention, growth rate, ROIC, whatever you want to look at, this usually rolls over into the valuation, right? And good investments happen where other people do not see an opportunity, but you do see one and then it actually materializes. And this is why I'm saying that yeah, okay, sure. Like companies that have good controlling and also experienced founders, they're not going to get for a valuation they're not going to sell their shares under value, and then, there's a reason why some people can raise we work too much money on something that does not really exist. And that is because, that's going back to my point on this one. So I don't want to fight with you too much on this because I had an interesting topic that I wanted to talk to you about.
Well, and I just one other thing on this point is that it's not an efficient market. Like you would think, oh, right, there's a formula where a company has certain revenue,
Yeah.
the growth rate's a certain rate, this is the valuation they're worth, and like it's a perfect efficient market. I think that there are pockets of efficiency, especially as you get towards like more publicly traded companies that have a lot more data available. But in private market investing, there's a lot of FOMO. There's a lot of sort of hot spaces. There's a lot of effects of people that are building in the Bay Area and that have a lot of connections. There's a number of things that kind of drive up valuations. And there also are businesses that get overlooked, businesses that are building in kind of off the beaten path locations, and often building in like really specific markets that might look at first glance like a small market size, not worth someone's time. There's often a lot of these like less sexy businesses that are undervalued or they're not where the value isn't fully appreciated by the market. So I would just caveat your comments of like, we feel like sometimes we can feel like we live in a world where like there's perfect information and like valuations are an output. But the reality is that that's not the world.
I 100% agree. I'm also like a little bit on this train right now that I don't talk about unicorns anymore, and I go with what Bessemer is saying, right? Like with the centaur. So a unicorn being you have a $1 billion valuation, and a centaur is you have 100 million in ARR, and exactly because of this reason, because valuation, so like how much is your entire thing actually worth, does not guarantee that you have a buyer first of all, and that it's going to materialize in this way, but centaurs or like $100 million ARR already means that at least in Europe, I think you're going to be within, at least in SaaS, you're going to be in the top 100 of all these companies, right? So like, I think it seems to be like a stable kind of thing that is a bit weird. First, we are always going for value. Now we're just going to go back to like, okay, now we're just going to go for ARR. So I'm actually also more on the train. I agree with you, right? Like I'm more on the train of like looking at companies in terms of like reach centaur status first, and then we look at your growth multiple that comes afterwards, because it's going to be so flaky, that it doesn't matter too much. So I have a very specific question to you in this regard. And I don't know whether you want to lean yourself out of the window in this regard, but I'm always interested in the entire CRM space. And you mentioned Clay from before, who is playing a very important role, also like as an attached business to this in terms of data enrichment. How do we think about getting our leads together in some kind of way, right? Like they're all part of this kind of entire value chain. So I've been a fangirl for HubSpot for a long, long, long time.
Who hurt you?
Sorry?
I said, who hurt you?
I don't know. Like, no, I've been a fan. I just don't like Salesforce. No, I think Salesforce actually hurt me.
That's who hurt. Okay.
So I think it's just a bigger hurt, right? And I have good experiences also with HubSpot in a pre-AI era. In a pre-AI era where the job was to kind of layer in a sales motion to a PLG company that was already existing. And I would contend that still to this day, it is a pretty good product. Now, here's the thing. The question that I'm trying to kind of figure out is that, so HubSpot has bought Clearbit, which is data enrichment, just for those. So basically, I have a contact and I need to either keep something updated or I need to enrich like one piece of information with who is Kyle, what does he eat, when does he eat it, where does he go for golfing? Not exactly, but that's the principle. So these CRMs, including HubSpot, the current CRMs that we had pre-AI, were always built on the same hypothesis, which was you have a specific amount of fields they were trying to feed from somewhere. Some of them are more automated, some of them are less automated. But one thing that these CRMs are extremely weak at is integrating with product usage data. And then we had this kind of wave of like sales needs to be data driven. So you have companies like Pocus that is still here in the market. We had a Correlated that blew up and so forth, which basically was, hey, we can generate analytics tools for salespeople to kind of fulfill this need of sales driven, like analysis in that sense. And I have a little bit fallen off the hype train there. I'm not sure. Like I have a kind of a tingling in my nose a little bit, in that I'm thinking there is now room for a new CRM space that actually does not rely on this kind of manual input from data that much, and that is much more flexible in like taking in, like product usage data. And actually, so a good example would be, hey, Kyle is using our product as an account. Has he already reached a specific stage where he will be converting more likely, and so forth? This is extremely hard to do with HubSpot still. I can send flags, don't get me wrong, right? Like you can manufacture all this shit if you want to, and if you have really complex integrations. But for smaller companies, this is still quite a big lift. Do you have any insights on this? Because this has been, as you can see, it's been going on in my head for quite some time now.
Yeah, it's interesting evolution. I mean, if I think about a future state that's ideal, we're pulling in signals that tell us, hey, this is an interesting account. We're then looking at where that account is and where the people in that account are with their journey with us. Are they free users of our product? Have they been on our marketing site? Have they attended any marketing activities? Have they, listened to a cold call? Whatever it is, and we're able to sort of bring that in and be able to orchestrate the go-to-market motion through essentially suggesting the next best action and being opinionated about whether that action should be completed by a person or a personalized thing that looks like it's from a person but it's actually automated, or just fully automated. And CRM would be much smarter and would actually be taking that data and leveraging it in the best possible way, versus right now, we're just sort of taking a database and just throwing more data at it and then confused by no one's using the data. But one of the things that has been really top of mind for me lately is this notion of like everyone's playing a role in building pipeline right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so as it gets harder to sell a customer, you're trying to do everything you can. So on the marketing side, you're doing SEO, you're doing paid LinkedIn, you're doing other, paid search. You're probably paying influencers, especially, that comes up a lot these days. Maybe trying to get your founder to write on LinkedIn, and then there's like some dark social happening. You're doing community. And then on the sales side, you have a BDR team who's doing cold email and so on, cold calling, cold LinkedIn. But then you've also got maybe an AI SDR. You've got you're trying to use Clay to do some automated campaigns. You've also got a product-led growth motion that has some sort of viral loop or a free sidecar product that's attracting users rather than buyers, and you kind of get folks signing up for a free trial. You might even have like customer support playing a role, which is kind of a separate topic too. But then there's partnerships, which we can get into. Like you have demand coming from all of these sources, but there's very little visibility into which of those things is actually working and driving incrementality with the right accounts that we care about. And meanwhile, the team that's supposed to be responsible for that pipeline, which I would say is marketing, they're fixated on an MQL number, which is an arbitrary definition of leads that generally are things that they're trying to take credit for through some sort of like attribution to say marketing is driving this many leads and we're hitting our lead volume, even though marketing is a small piece of the overall puzzle. And there's actually a much bigger unlock to be able to look at everything that could be impactful for influencing your target customer and actually understanding what is the relative sort of efficiency and incrementality of those different actions, and how can you bring them together in a way that maybe makes it harder to attribute what exactly worked, but ultimately influences buyers really well.
I really like this. So let's go into the hate portion of MQLs, because I feel like the entire thing that goes around this is because you said something really clever, which you are aware of course. But like, I just want to also lay it out for the audience again. if you're thinking about these three silos that we have and how they're incentivized to ship anything or like do something in the product, right? So we have sales that is very incentives driven. Then we have product that just ships something. That just usually do not talk about revenue at all in the classical companies. And then we have marketing that is very, very goal oriented usually, right? Like it's also pipeline, but it's not that you're going to get paid anything. It's just like either you deliver 500 paid accounts at this point or you're just going to get axed. That's usually their incentive, like you're out of a job or you can keep it. So their quota is a little bit different. If you think about it in this way, and let's just say it's not as linear as it used to be, because it's not like sales is coming in and then you have, or like marketing is doing something and then sales is handling it and then product is serving them. Exactly what you just said is happening. So like, let's say you have a future CRM that is handling all of this, right? So like Kyle comes in, I know you've been at our booth in an event. We gave you free socks and you were so smiling so hard that we know that you're going to probably convert into a paid customer in the next month. The best possible step right now could be coming from marketing. The best possible step could now be coming from sales. It could also be coming from product. I don't know. Maybe the CRM knows. But if you have to build a company that is sustainable in kind of taking what is the best for the customer conversion right now and not just for your silo, that is really fucking hard to build. That is really, really, really hard to build. I just want to, like, for instance, if you have salespeople that are getting incentivized on signatures, they're going to make sure that they're going to get more signatures, right? Like they're playing the system in that sense. So like these old incentive models do not work again. And now to your example of MQLs, same deal. If you have a bad definition for an MQL, and I would like to also hear from you what you think about it, right? Like, should we just like get rid of them? Like what do we use instead? But if you have MQLs that are just like being incentivized on like, I mean, to be honest, you rarely see like just like bring a specific amount of traffic. There is some kind of qualifier in there. But even then, you usually still end up with the finger pointing exercise where sales says the MQLs are not good enough. And then marketing says like sales is shit. They cannot convert our stuff. So how do we reconcile this? This sounds like an organizational problem. I have some ideas on how I structure MQLs, but I'm very far away from a CMO. So I would like to hear actually your point first. So what should we do with this?
Yeah. Well, so if I think about like from an MQL standpoint, we could either improve it or kill it, right? And so if you think about improving it would be try to be as kind of truthful as possible around what a good quality lead is that sales is going to be excited about and could actually turn into both pipeline and revenue. And so that probably means strict qualification around, fitting your ideal customer profile and also having buying intent, right? Where they're going to actually be willing to talk to sales team. But like in general, what I find with MQLs is that it's the mindset just creates so much waste. You're basically doing a bunch of unfocused marketing activity towards generally an audience that you think is relevant for you. And then getting a lot of people interested in what you're doing. And then you're saying, all right, we're going to score this down. And then we'll take a portion of these and call them MQLs, right? It's super inefficient. It's very spray and pray oriented. And then it's arbitrary what that cutoff is that makes someone either an MQL or not an MQL. Mm-hmm. And it's, to me, that motion is very backwards, right? I think if I were to design something from scratch, what I think about is, hey, we have these kinds of profiles of target accounts. We're trying to sell to accounts, let's say in France, that have at least 500 employees that are in these industries that maybe are using HubSpot already. Okay, great. Well, with modern data tooling, we can actually know exactly what accounts those are. We can name them. We can figure out who the buyers are at those accounts. We can get contact information for them. And so we can essentially say our TAM is 5,000 target customers. And based on, the different buying roles in those companies, there's maybe 3 to 5 relevant contacts at those customers. And then we can start to say, all right, well, where actually are we in their journey of buying our product, right? Are they aware of us? Are they, actively kind of evaluating different solutions? Are they, considering vendors? Like where actually are we in their purchase journey? And then we can figure out what is able to influence those accounts from being totally unaware, but in our TAM, to wanting to be, having a conversation with sales and ultimately becoming revenue, right? Or, in a PLG motion, potentially not even needing to talk to sales, right? Just automatically becoming revenue. And if we were to shift from that standpoint, MQLs are just super arbitrary and not relevant. There is a similar-ish stage where you might say, hey, there's a group that's interested in our product but is not yet in a buying cycle, right? And you might say, for anyone that is getting to that interested stage, we maybe do want a BDR to call them because we think that that's low-hanging fruit for the sales team to book a meeting with or whatever. But we might also say for people in this category, let's offer up a free trial. Let's offer up a promotion. Let's send a kind of semi-personalized looking email campaign that's actually automated through a Clay. But if you think in terms of, I think that MQL, you end up being so goal-oriented around improving MQLs, which is an arbitrary, and like I said, it's just super inefficient, or a metric that drives an inefficient mindset, rather than thinking about where you are with your target accounts and their journey and what can you do as a business to influence them.
So here's a question. I think I wrote this in a presentation last year for the first time, in the way that I'm thinking that MQLs are really powerful if we define them as a measure of how many ICPs can you bring to a specific state, call it the aha moment, whatever you want to call it, for which dollar measure. So there's two measures in there, right? So the first one is the efficiency, because if you spend $1,000 to get Kyle in there, then Kyle needs to have a specific value. So this is already baked into the ICP. And then we can also kind of measure how many of those you have to kind of bring, right? How many Kyles? Bring me 50 Kyles for not more than $50, whatever, right? That would be the kind of the CAC equivalent for sales. And an interesting thing that I started to see from my perspective, so I'm a very CPO kind of perspective, is that usually you have a call with founders at some point, and then they tell you, we have great marketing, but they're not that interested in what we're doing on the product, right? We have an alignment problem. They're not really aligned with what's happening on the release plan and so forth. Then you have these convoluted processes that everybody pisses off and so forth. And I found it very interesting because I always received a challenge when I was saying this, this MQL definition that goes into the aha moment. They always told me, yeah, but shouldn't you define goals that marketing has complete control over? And I felt that, well, actually not, because an SQL or an MQL that is delivered to sales is also something that sales does not have complete control over. But what it does is it starts to incentivize marketing to be present when it comes to discussions that are happening in the product, to changing the onboarding experience or whatever it is. So I actually start to use this aha moment. And I want to give an example for people here. Let's say we take HubSpot, and I don't know what they have as an aha moment at all, but let's say it would be the first time they start to enrich a client with company address, and they get some meaningful data out of it, and they do something with it. If this is the goal that needs to be reached by the ICPs that I'm pulling in from marketing, then marketing starts to care a lot about this entire thing. Hey, don't water it down, right? Don't make the entire product experience too convoluted. There's too many things. And I actually think this is a good thing, because my biggest problem has always been how do I make marketing and sales interested in what the product does? Because no matter what you do as a CPO, how much you try to interest them, they're just not incentivized to really care. Sales does not care, because as long as they can promise something, they will get the signature, unless you have clawback clauses and some other kind of measures and so forth. So there you can kind of solve it a little bit over there. But what do you think about this? So I think what I'm hearing from you is that this ICP needs to be baked into the MQL definition. 100% agree. And not just firmographics, but also hey, what tools are they using? What are other qualifiers? And maybe in this ICP definition, there also needs to be an aha moment. I don't know. But this is something that I pay a lot of attention to.
I think, if the business is a business that maybe has some sort of sales and self-serve component, right, is kind of a at-scale software business, what I think of is that marketing is generally responsible for pipeline within, a set of target accounts. And that pipeline number might be different based on, hey, these are SMB accounts, where pipeline is more tied to self-serve, right? And then on the enterprise side is maybe based on essentially sales sort of qualified opportunities within certain stages. But if marketing is responsible for that pipeline, they're going to be, yes, there are going to be things that they don't have control over in terms of like they're not actually responsible for the onboarding flow as you described, or maybe the BDR team doesn't officially report to them, but they act like the owner that's going to orchestrate across everything. And instead of sort of trying to make the marketing team responsible for everything or have the biggest possible budget or headcount, they're going to think, all right, maybe actually we need an ops team plus AI that can drive this part of the journey. Or maybe we need to do X, or maybe I need to go partner with product and we need better product onboarding emails to get people to this stage. Like if they can have visibility over kind of that broader goal, even though they're not getting on the hook for doing everything to get there, I think it's actually a much more fun job for a CMO because you're way more strategic in the organization. You're kind of naturally partnering with and influencing other teams. And alignment isn't really as much of an issue because you have a goal that is very aligned with the company goal. And so you're kind of naturally going to be working with as many different people as possible. But they're also going to be motivated to work with you as well because you're very aligned around what you're both trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think this is very true. And I always feel like I still come back to this point on where I feel like marketing and product and sales, yes, they should be always on the same table, but in practice they just aren't because usually CEOs don't know how to structure this entire thing. And I think I'm actually not sure whether we talked about this as well. Like, how do you see the role of customer success in this entire thing? Because usually we always push like this kind of customer success role into like it's after sales, right? Like customer success is like always after sales and so forth. I have a little bit of a different perspective on this, and I hope this is not too big of a jump right now. But do you know what I'm getting at? Like, how do you see this? Like the silo customer success, and maybe also like customer success as a function of something that we try to deliver. How do you see the role in this?
In some cases, so again, like if you think about with this broader motion, right? If you're trying to think about moving target accounts through the journey with you, what often happens for modern businesses is that there's some sort of self-serve component towards an individual user that doesn't mean they're spending a lot of money yet. They're probably using the product for free, but they might become sales pipeline in the future because they are like a marketing manager at your target account that could spend 100K, right? That's an account that's really valuable. And the way to convert them to that sales pipeline, in the past might have been, hey, they signed up for a free account. This means they're a hot lead. They're an MQL for sales. Let's go put a BDR on to try to get them to talk to a sales rep. Well, they haven't ever seen value in the product. They don't know what it can do for them. They're probably not a buyer. They're an individual user. And so what you might want to do instead is put a support assist person who can actually kind of guide that person to set up the product, see real value in it, and also start to ask some qualifying questions like, hey, who else in your team would benefit from this? Or what are you trying to do with this? What are some of the goals that your company has? Who do you report to, right? Like you can get some really useful information that will help both personalize the next steps, but also, qualify that this is an interesting opportunity for sales. And that's a motion that in many ways like moves customers through the journey and creates kind of valuable pipeline in an efficient way. But you would never be able to figure out that was the right thing to do if you kind of had this like marketing gets someone to an MQL and then sales takes it from here mindset. And you really need to be stepping back and thinking about what's actually motivating that customer to move through the journey. No. But I think, to your point, customer support, I think sometimes this role is in customer support, but sometimes it's essentially customer success. But it's essentially like the broader concept is sales assist, right? And the idea that if the sales motion, rather than being commercial, is actually helping customers with the commercial kind of piece in the back of your mind, you can actually deliver a better customer experience that has much higher responses and is still efficient. Because once the customer sets up your product and has integrations running, they're running their business based on it. Like they've essentially already made a purchase decision just based on how they use your product rather than based on what they've been spending.
Yeah, and I think this also goes a little bit to the point of the importance of expansion revenue and how we look at it also in PLG. And I think this is also one of the conversations that I always have to have a little bit with sales-led companies, where it's just try to explain. So, hey, so how much expansion revenue is healthy, right? Like, what is a kind of a good ratio? I'm not sure where you are right now as well. Like, I think I go always with what Dave Kellogg says. Like, the 30% is still that, it's kind of a reasonable thing per year that you have really like expansion revenue, because otherwise you don't have enough net new logos and so forth. But I think the outliers are more like in the 50% range and so forth. But if you think about it in this way, is that if a third of your revenue has to come from expansion, really like internal accounts gaining more value, this is also a marketing issue, right? Like, so if we're moving into down market, so we're starting to acquire customers earlier in their journey, and then they expand into exactly what you said, like, are there other teams that use your stuff? Can we actually contact a regional manager that is managing like 5 of these teams that are individually in our product and so forth? How is this not a marketing conversation anymore?
Right.
It is exactly a marketing conversation, and then it becomes a sales conversation again. So this is why this entire flow does not work anymore.
Totally. And so if their KPI is pipeline within target accounts, that's absolutely part of the job, right? Because you're figuring out what's the best way to get to that number, even if marketing doesn't control everything. And I think that's a great low hanging fruit area, right? That's probably ignored, but that it's one of the best ways to hit the pipeline goal is to build some campaigns towards that audience.
I think it also gives you a lot of freedom in like kind of changing your tactics and how you want to achieve that. If you set a goal like this instead of like the old kind of MQL garbage. Sorry. I like how I'm telling marketing people how to do their business right now. But I think, it really goes a little bit to this point of like, yeah, if you think about it, like if you take a company from 20 years ago, the way that they just operated, like where they were even less kind of flexible, and you would put them now into today, the customer gets handed off from sales to customer success to the product, then to support because they're not spending enough anymore, and then back to the product, then back to sales. This is every time you have a cut like this, the customer will feel it. Every time they have to call someone and they do not know what you have been doing in the product before. Usually a salesperson knows what other sales conversations you had in the company, but that is not the whole story, right? Maybe you had some support incidents. Maybe this is now maybe solved. I don't know, but maybe you had some support incidents. Maybe you were doing something very specific in the product and so forth. There's still, every time you cross a silo, you feel it. You 100% feel it. And it's like, I can tell you this particular moment when you order something in a like, I don't know, in one of these new fashion stores, and you know exactly when you're getting handed off from support to customer success because you're a churn risk. You just know, right? It's like you've been raising so much of a stink that they're like, oh, no. Sorry, Miss Dara. Oh, no. It's fine. Everything is way.
I think that might be a you thing, but now we're going to do a personal example.
Yeah, I would never use my forbidden knowledge to know how companies like these work to kind of get myself into different hands of people who have some more authority over budget. I would never do that.
Oh, man. Well, that does remind me, one of my favorite things to do with an app is when I immediately purchase it on a monthly plan, or maybe not immediately, but like within a few weeks, I go to cancel it, and then you almost always get some sort of offer. You're like, all right.
Yeah, it's true. Okay, good. I think we destroyed MQLs. I think that's the end of that one. So that's pretty
all
good.
done.
But
Just they're gone now.
No, but like, so let me just ask you maybe one final question, and but you could ramble as long as you want. But in regards to the future, which is always an interesting beast because we all know exactly how the future plays out. AI overlords taking everything. But how do you see right now the future for investing in that sense? Because we have really we have different hypotheses, right? So like Europe is overly regulated, the US is not regulated at all. Companies are trying to just like make way and so forth. Are we in a bubble? Like, do you think Do you think we're heading to a bubble here somewhere, in the sense of like one that also can explode, like not just like one that just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, specifically on AI and all these new tools that are coming up right now as well, like that make a lot of money with it?
It's odd. We're both in a bubble and not in a bubble at the same time. If that makes sense. In my view, there's a lot of AI innovation that's probably overhyped, where there's a lot of capex going to products that aren't producing sort of tangible business value, but it's almost like an arms race, or there's some FOMO of not investing in it or not going after it. But if I kind of zoom out, technology spend is a relatively small part of global GDP, and it's the driver of what makes kind of economies more productive and therefore kind of producing more, right? We can get more done per individual by having technology, right? That was the promise with computers, with the internet, with mobile phones, and so on. And there is normally a lag in how it plays out, but the more business value that technology can bring, the more overall benefit there is to society, and therefore, with the more kind of benefit there can be to individual companies in this ecosystem. And so that's where I just go back to finding products that tangible business value, it's specifically kind of economic value to customers. And if they know the precise target customer, they know exactly kind of the context of that customer, of what they've been doing before, why it doesn't work. And then they build a product to solve that specific problem. And normally they're building a product to solve the problem through a combination of software and AI, and maybe even people in the loop too, right, as an additional sanity check. But it's normally not just AI, at least if you want to do it well. And then there's also some sort of data they can bring in, and then that data gets stronger over time as they have more customers. But if you can find those opportunities, you're providing a really sizable upside for your customers and are able to share in that value that you're creating, and ultimately can build, I think, like a bigger and bigger business around it. And there's so many of these types of companies out there and types of technologies that are not, no one's talking about them on LinkedIn. They're not part of the Silicon Valley echo chamber, right? It's not getting the headlines like, a CTO leaving OpenAI gets in the headlines, right? But these are businesses that are actually like real businesses creating real value. And I don't see a bubble with a company like that.
No, I think I kind of agree, but like my position is always on the go to market side, in terms of like, um back in the days when HubSpot really kind of coined this term inbound, the known channels that we have to create inbound. So I think inbound will always stay important, of course, right? But like the known channels that we have for inbound, they're so oversaturated, and they will be becoming so over automated that they will actually not work. Going back to your very initial kind of example that you said, right? Like everybody's copying it, and then it's just like you don't know anymore, like whether someone who's saying something is actually true, or whether it's a copy from another guy that they just copied, and so forth.
I hear you. I think, yeah, it's like the old playbooks will not work, but now actually what people are going to have to find out is how to do original content, right? You've grown a newsletter very quickly as one person. I've grown a newsletter really quickly as one person as well. Meanwhile, there are these businesses that have thousands of employees, dozens in marketing, including like a bunch in content marketing, that don't know how to write original, thoughtful content for an audience that actually is so good that people are either willing to pay for it or share it widely. Because they're used to this content that's like SEO optimized, with like they're hitting on the precise search term that they think has the most traffic, and then it's like basically garbage to read it, right? And so that like old SEO style content, I think like has to go. Probably should have gone a while ago, but there are ways to stand out, and that's what I get excited about in tech, is that even as certain channels start to feel like they're dying, or certain activities start to feel like they've been saturated, there's always this sort of like next sort of wave of companies that are doing things differently and getting better results. And it's really hard for incumbents to change and keep up. But the founders and the kind of teams that are able to keep an eye towards these trends and kind of build them into their business are often able to kind of sustain continued innovation and continued growth at scale.
I mean, I don't disagree. I'm just saying that I think it goes a little bit to your point of like, as long as you know your ICPs, you should also know where they communicate. And I just don't think that it's going to be that universally accessible over LinkedIn anymore or some other like, like generic channels and so forth, unless you already have like specific brand people that okay, like they're actually, as you said, they generate really good content. But so for instance, one of my ICPs are VCs. And you cannot talk to VCs if you do not have WhatsApp installed. It's just one of the truths in the industry. Because every VC, for some reason, is using WhatsApp. It's not Telegram. It's not Signal. It's WhatsApp. I don't know how that came to be, but I do know from other companies that I've worked with that different specific ICPs and verticals have sometimes really illogical kind of communities somewhere hidden away.
A lot of Facebook communities are still really effective. And I'm like, who's on Facebook these days?
No, this is true. Like a lot of the business that we do at Got Photo is still happening on Facebook. So, I mean, this goes to the point, like ICPs are also communicating in different channels. And maybe you can reach everyone on LinkedIn, but maybe not really. So, I don't know. Yeah. But okay, before we go too much into Lea Rebel, Tyle, should people contact you? If so, where should they do it? Do you want to hear from them, or should they just like read your newsletter and then just wonder how you're doing all of this?
Well, I do try to be pretty accessible. Obviously, I can't like hop on the phone with everyone who reaches out, but add me on LinkedIn, subscribe to my newsletter. Yeah, if you hit reply to the newsletter, all replies go to my inbox. I try to respond to all of them, maybe at 80%. I don't know, maybe I'm worse than that, but
yeah, it's okay. Just leave a responsible kind of percentage over so you can always refer to that.
Yeah, but I do. I mean, to me, what I'm doing is really working with and learning from companies that are really forward thinking, and then able to distill a lot of those insights and kind of share those back with the community, obviously with permission of the companies I'm working with, or with that sometimes helping them put a spotlight on some of the innovations they're doing to attract talent. But I get excited about learning from folks. And a lot of what I do is like test an idea on LinkedIn that's like something in the back of my mind. I'm like, I've got to put this out there. And it either gets a really interesting response where there's a bunch of comments and like people are engaged. And some of those comments are like, not just, this is so insightful. It's like, hey, this is an interesting idea, but you're dumb because A, B, and C are like better ways of thinking about it. Like able to, by kind of being so public, I'm able to learn from other people, get to know really smart people in the industry, and then write a more hopefully thoughtful perspective on my newsletter, Growth Unhinged. And then the community makes it stronger, right? By then people reply to that, or I have conversations because someone read the piece. And that's how I try to stay kind of that one step ahead of other people, is that I kind of really take that feedback in stride, because to me, Growth Unhinged is a community platform as much as it is like an individual newsletter.
Yeah, but you did a good stretch between your own personal brand and that, right? Like it is also attached to your name, which is a good thing. I think it's a really good thing. And it's not like you asked Lea for 2 or 3 months to write an article for you and she just never came up with it.
2 or 3 months? You mean more like 9 or 10 months?
I am so sorry. It's not that you're not important enough. It's just that I'm extremely busy. It's just like what it is. No, but I will get around to it. So yes, okay, no, but highly recommend your podcast. Sorry, like your Substack. I honestly think it's a brilliant piece. Like you're always coming up with really good ideas and questions where I'm like, I wish I would have thought about that. And that's a really good thing, and I appreciate you for it. And but that's enough compliments now, because now I'm out of compliments, and that is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for coming today, Kyle.
Thanks for having me on.
Boom, boom. You're done. Thank you so much for listening to The Product Tea with Lea. If you don't have enough yet, you can subscribe to my podcast right now on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can head to my website, leatarin.com, which is leahtharin.com, where you can find much more of my material or just want to work with me.